The strangest thing about the day humanity became terrifying was that it started with a man buying junk for 40 credits. I was there in the auction pit of Port Meridian, a trade station floating above the dead orange moon of Caros, and I laughed with everyone else when the human raised his hand. His name was Caleb Walker, though at the time none of us bothered to remember it. He looked like every human I had ever seen. Too soft, too calm, too underdressed for a room full of species who negotiated with claws, contracts, and private security drones. He wore a faded work jacket, old boots, and the expression of a man comparing prices at a hardware store in Ohio, not bidding on abandoned alien property 300 million miles from the nearest Earth embassy. The auctioneer projected the lot above us. One forgotten maintenance garage, Outer Ring, Bay 17, inactive for 912 standard years, no confirmed inventory, no working power core, no commercial value. Even the hologram looked embarrassed to show it. The structure was squat, ugly, dust-covered, and half buried under old station plating. Its doors had rust scars. Its beacon was dead. Its ownership chain had passed through bankrupt mining guilds, defunct war trusts, and one gambling syndicate that apparently lost it in a card game. The opening bid was 40 credits. No one moved. Then Caleb lifted 2 fingers. The room went quiet for half a second, and then the laughter came down like hail on a tin roof. A Vorton banker clicked all 4 mandibles and said humans would buy anything if you told them it was vintage. A blueskin salvage captain asked if Caleb planned to park his little Earth bicycle inside. Even I smiled, and I was supposed to be recording official transaction notes. Caleb did not blush, argue, or defend himself. He just looked at the rotating image of Bay 17 and asked one question. Does the purchase include whatever is bolted to the floor? The auctioneer blinked all 6 eyes. Yes, human. The trash comes with the trash. More laughter. Caleb nodded once. Sold. 40 credits. That should have been the end of it. A foolish human, a dead garage, a cheap joke for the station bars. But 6 minutes after the sale finalized, Port Meridian's long-range sensors screamed so loudly that every drink in the auction hall trembled. 12 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel beyond the moon's shadow, black-hulled and running silent, the kind of ships that never arrived for honest business. Their transponders were masked. Their weapons were cold but ready. Their formation pointed directly at Bay 17. That was when the laughter stopped. Caleb looked at the alarm lights washing the room red, then down at his ownership receipt, then back at the dead little garage on the hologram. He did not look surprised. He looked like a mechanic who had just heard an engine knock and finally understood what part was broken. The auctioneer whispered that no forgotten garage was worth sending a strike fleet. Caleb folded the receipt, slipped it into his jacket pocket, and said quietly, "No, but whatever they forgot inside might be." The first mistake everyone made was assuming Caleb Walker had bid on Bay 17 because he was cheap. The second mistake was assuming humans only understood things built on Earth. After the alarm began pulsing through Port Meridian, the auction hall changed shape without moving an inch. The same aliens who had been laughing at Caleb suddenly discovered important reasons to step away from him. Chairs scraped backward. Assistants whispered into wrist translators. Private guards lowered their hands toward legal stun tools and pretended they were only adjusting their belts. I watched Caleb more closely then, because fear reveals status faster than any badge. He had no entourage, no military crest, no corporate seal, just that old work jacket, those scuffed boots, and a paper-thin ownership receipt that every wealthy creature in the room had ignored until armed ships appeared outside the moon. He turned back toward the hologram of Bay 17 and studied it like a man reading a map his grandfather had folded wrong. The garage sat in the outer maintenance ring, nearly 1 mile from the polished merchant docks, tucked behind obsolete fuel lines and a collapsed transit tunnel. To us, it was dead architecture. To Caleb, apparently, it was a sentence missing one word. He leaned closer and pointed at the left side of the holographic door. "Magnify that seam," he said. The auctioneer hesitated, then obeyed. The image enlarged. I saw nothing useful. Scratched metal, old heat marks, a diagonal weld scar about 6 feet long. Ugly work. Primitive work. Caleb's eyes narrowed. "That is not Valorian fusion bonding," he said. The auctioneer gave a dry little laugh, trying to recover his dignity. "Human, Every maintenance bay in that ring was built by Valorian contractors. Caleb shook his head. The frame is Valorian. The repair is not. That weld was done by hand. Someone patched that door under pressure, without a clean room, probably with a portable torch and bad lighting. A few aliens chuckled again, but softer this time. They wanted the old rhythm back. Mock the human. Shrink the human. Make the room feel safe again. It did not work. Caleb tapped the image twice. See the overlap pattern? 3 passes, left to right, with a 1/4-inch ridge. That is emergency hull work. I have seen it on old Terran rescue craft in museums back in Houston. Nobody spoke for 3 full seconds. Then a tall, silver-skinned noble stepped out from the upper bidder row, dressed in black glass armor polished bright enough to reflect every nervous face in the room. Vorik Thane. Even I knew that name. He owned salvage fleets from here to the Arcturus lanes and had the calm smile of a creature who bought problems before they became expensive. Mr. Walker, he said, pronouncing the human name like it tasted unpleasant, I believe you may have purchased more responsibility than your species is prepared to manage. Caleb looked at him once, then back at the hologram. That your fleet outside? Vorik smiled wider. A concerned precaution. Caleb nodded, almost politely. Then you were concerned before I bought it. That landed harder than an accusation. Vorik's smile held, but something behind his eyes went cold. He offered 4,000 credits. Then 40,000. Then 4 million. The auctioneer nearly fell over his own podium. Caleb did not move. I have worked around traders my entire career. Every species has. A greed smell. A pulse change. A throat click. A pupil flare. Something. Caleb had none of it. He was not dazzled by the money. He was measuring the fear behind it. Vorik lowered his voice. Human, you do not know what you are standing beside. Caleb folded his arms, and for the first time I noticed the grease under his fingernails, the tiny burn scar near his thumb, the hands of someone who had spent his life fixing things other people gave up on. Maybe not, he said, but you do. Outside the viewing glass, the massed ships shifted formation above the moon, neat and silent. Inside the hall, the hologram flickered as Bay 17 responded to the transfer of ownership for the first time in 9 centuries. A single light appeared above the garage door. Not blue, not green, red, Terran red. The red light above Bay 17 should not have been visible from the auction hall. That was the first technical impossibility. The garage sat behind 12 sealed bulkheads, 2 service corridors, and enough dead infrastructure to hide a small city. Yet the moment that light came alive, every public display on Port Meridian showed it. Food court menus blinked out. Departure boards went dark. Luxury advertisements for ocean planets vanished mid-sparkle. For one breath, the entire station belonged to a forgotten door and the human who had bought it. Then the station network printed one sentence across every screen in plain English. Ownership recognized. I did not speak English then, but my translator whispered the meaning directly into my auditory nerves, and somehow that made it worse. Caleb Walker stared at the words with the face of a man who had found an old key under a floorboard. Vorik Thane stopped smiling completely. That was when I understood the situation had levels, and we were standing on the lowest one. The auctioneer tried to cancel the sale, of course. That is what bureaucrats do when history begins making noise. He struck the emergency dispute icon with 3 shaking fingers and declared the transfer under review. The system rejected him before his sentence ended. Not delayed. Not pending. Rejected. A calm mechanical voice answered from every speaker in the hall, older than any station protocol I had ever heard. Civilian authority insufficient. Terran salvage covenant active. Caleb turned slowly toward Vorik. You knew there was a covenant. Vorik said nothing. He did not need to. His guards were already forming a soft wall around him, and his ships outside the moon adjusted again, sliding into a clean intercept pattern like predators circling a wounded animal. Except Caleb was not wounded. He was curious. That was the truly unnerving part. We began moving toward the outer ring under station escort, though escort is a generous word for 8 security officers pretending they would not rather be anywhere else. I followed because I was the official transaction witness, and because my supervisor hissed into my earpiece that if the human became rich, dead, or historically significant, the department needed documentation. The route to Bay 17 took us away from polished Port Meridian and into the bones of the station. The air changed first. Less perfume, more old metal. The lights became spaced farther apart. The floor plating rattled under our steps. Caleb walked at the front beside a security drone, hands loose, eyes scanning pipes, vents, seams, faded warning paint. He did not move like a tourist. He moved like he was listening to the building. At junction C12, Vorik's voice arrived through the corridor speakers, smooth as poured oil. Mr. Walker, this is your last opportunity to accept compensation. 100 million credits. Immediate transfer, no questions asked. Every officer froze. I nearly dropped my recorder. 100 million credits would buy a private island dome on 3 different garden worlds. Caleb kept walking. The offer rose to 500 million before we reached the freight lift. Then 1 billion. Then Vorik stopped pretending this was business. Human, he said, and the speakers crackled under the weight of his anger. Some doors are sealed because opening them embarrasses empires. Caleb pressed the freight lift button. The doors groaned apart. He looked up at the nearest camera and said, then maybe the empires should have paid their storage fees. I will admit something shameful. I laughed. Not because it was funny, although it was. I laughed because no sane creature spoke to Vorik Thane like that while his ships waited outside with silent weapons and expensive lawyers. The lift carried us down 42 levels. Halfway there, the temperature dropped by 20 degrees. Frost formed along the railings. My breath fogged. Caleb rubbed one thumb over the burn scar on his hand, not nervous, just thinking. At the bottom, the doors opened to a corridor that had not seen regular traffic in centuries. And at the far end stood Bay 17. The garage was larger in person, almost the size of an aircraft hangar back on Earth, with a dented door wide enough to swallow a shuttle. Dust covered everything except one place. A small panel beside the entrance, freshly lit in Terran red. Caleb stepped toward it. Every alien behind him stepped back. The panel scanned his palm before he touched it. The old voice returned, softer now, almost relieved. Walker Bloodline accepted. Welcome back, mechanic. The door of Bay 17 did not open like a garage door. It unfolded like something pretending to be simple. First came the hiss of pressure seals, then a deep mechanical thud that rolled through the floor and climbed up my legs. Then 6 layers of ancient metal withdrew into the walls with the slow confidence of a vault that had never been worried about thieves. The air that drifted out smelled wrong for a station bay. Not rotten, not stale. Clean, cold, and sharp, like a thunderstorm over hot pavement. Caleb Walker stood in front of it with one hand near the lit panel, squinting into the darkness as if he were checking whether someone had left the shop lights on. Behind us, the security officers raised their devices. I raised my recorder. Vorik Thane raised the stakes. 3 figures dropped from the service duct above the corridor without a sound, landing between Caleb and the open bay. They were not station security. Their armor was matte gray, their faceplates blank, their movements synchronized in that expensive way only professional trouble can afford. One held a compact plasma cutter modified far beyond workplace regulations. Another carried a restraint launcher. The third simply flexed 2 long mechanical gloves that hummed with stored force. The lead one pointed at Caleb and said, "Step away from the door, human." Caleb looked at the 3 of them, then looked at the security officers, who suddenly became fascinated by the ceiling, the floor, and every moral excuse in between. I expected Caleb to retreat. Any reasonable being would have. He was not armored. He was not armed in any official sense. He had a folded receipt, a work jacket, and a face that suggested mild inconvenience. Instead, he glanced into the bay and said, "You fellows work for Vorik, or are you independent idiots?" I made a small sound that I will deny until the day I hatch again. The lead mercenary fired the restraint launcher. Caleb moved before the net opened. Not fast like a predator. Efficient like a falling wrench. He stepped sideways, caught a dangling power cable from the wall, and yanked it across the corridor. The net struck the cable, wrapped around it, and snapped tight against an old support pipe with a bright flash and an embarrassed pop. The mercenary stared at his empty launcher. Caleb said, "That is why you do not shoot near exposed wiring." The second one rushed him. Caleb backed into the bay entrance, grabbed a rolling tool cart buried under dust, and kicked the wheel lock free. The cart shot forward in the low outer ring gravity, not hard enough to seriously injure anyone, but perfectly placed to take the attacker off balance and send him sliding backward into a stack of empty storage crates. The crash was loud, harmless, and deeply humiliating. Laughter did not return. Fear had taken its seat. The third mercenary swung one humming glove toward Caleb's shoulder. Caleb ducked under it, slapped the wall panel with his palm, and the ancient garage reacted like it had been waiting for permission. A magnetic lift arm dropped from the ceiling, caught the glove by its charge field, and pinned it gently but completely in midair. The mercenary pulled. The arm did not care. Caleb did not even look impressed. He was already watching the lead one reach for the plasma cutter. That was when the garage lights came on one row at a time, revealing workbenches, suspended engines, sealed lockers, and a floor marked with faded yellow Terran letters. I could not read them, but my translator could. Authorized personnel only. Caleb picked up an old steel wrench from the nearest bench, weighed it once in his hand, and finally smiled. "Gentlemen," he said, "this is private property now." The phrase private property should not have frightened anyone. It was a legal statement, not a weapon. But inside Bay 17, the words moved through the air like a password, and the garage answered. Every suspended engine above us rotated toward Caleb Walker. Every wall panel blinked awake in sequence. The old workbenches unlocked with soft metallic clicks, and a line of amber lights ran across the floor, tracing a path from Caleb's boots to the center of the bay. The three mercenaries stopped, trying to look professional. The one pinned by the magnetic lift arm went very still. The one tangled near the storage crates slowly raised both hands. The lead mercenary lowered the plasma cutter by 1 inch, which in his line of work was practically a prayer. Caleb noticed the movement and tilted the wrench against his shoulder like he was leaning on a fence post back in Kansas. "Smart choice," he said. Then something beneath the floor began to turn. Not power on. Not machinery starting. Turning. Like a massive lock being opened from the inside. Dust lifted in perfect circles around the bay. The temperature dropped again. My recorder filled with static, then corrected itself, then began translating a signal no one had asked it to receive. The garage voice returned, but it no longer sounded like a station system. It sounded older, deeper, and strangely familiar, as if it had learned authority from a battlefield and patience from a library. Unauthorized hostile presence detected. Defensive restraint protocols active. The word restraint saved every creature in that room from panic, including me. The garage was not attacking. It was organizing. Soft blue fields appeared around the mercenaries, holding them in place as gently as museum glass around priceless artifacts. Their weapons powered down by themselves. Their armor. Displays went blank. Their communication links disconnected one after another with polite little tones. Caleb looked up at the ceiling. "Appreciate the help." The voice paused, and I swear on every moon I have ever filed taxes under, the machine sounded confused. "Confirm command tone. Confirm informal Terran operator behavior." Caleb frowned. Did the garage just call me casual? The lights brightened. Terran genetic pattern verified. Walker bloodline confirmed. Maintenance authority transferred. Emergency inheritance chain restored. That was when Vorik Thane's voice burst through the corridor speakers, no longer smooth, no longer elegant, just sharp with fear he had failed to hide. "That is impossible." The Terran line was erased from the registry. Caleb turned toward the nearest camera, and for once his calm expression changed. Not anger. Recognition. The kind that arrives when a story your family told as a joke suddenly opens a locked door in space. "My grandfather used to say his grandfather lost a shipyard in a card game," Caleb said quietly. "We all thought he meant a business in Detroit." The floor responded to his words. A circular section at the center of the bay split open, not with drama, but with clean engineering. A column rose from below, carrying a black metal console covered in dustless glass. On that glass was a faded emblem, a wrench crossed with a star, and below it, written in English, the name Walker Deep Range Repair, Licensed Terran Emergency Fleet Service. No one laughed. No one even breathed loudly. The garage had never been alien. The station had been built around it, buried it, renamed it, sold it, forgotten it, and mocked the only species that could wake it up. Caleb stepped to the console. The surface scanned his palm and projected a map of 17 hidden bays scattered across the sector, each one pulsing red, each one waiting. Then a financial ledger opened beside the map. I did not understand the numbers at first because there were too many zeros. The auctioneer did. He made a tiny, broken sound. Caleb looked at the balance, then at the camera where Vorik was watching. 2 trillion credits, he said. Vorik did not answer. The garage did. Primary treasure vault remained sealed, awaiting mechanic approval. Caleb Walker stared at the words primary treasure vault the way most creatures stare at incoming disaster. Except he looked more offended than afraid. Treasure vault, he said, like the garage had just tried to sell him an extended warranty. I thought the 2 trillion was the treasure. The machine answered immediately. Negative. Financial reserve is maintenance liquidity. That sentence broke something in the room. The auctioneer sat down on a crate without checking whether it was clean. One of the security officers whispered a number into his wrist unit, probably asking how much maintenance liquidity could buy his entire bloodline. I kept recording because my hands had forgotten how to do anything else. Caleb rubbed the back of his neck, then looked toward the corridor camera where Vorik Thane was still listening. You hear that, Vorik? Apparently, I bought a garage with a checking account. For the first time, Vorik did not answer right away. When his voice returned, it was quieter, colder, and stripped of every polite decoration. Mr. Walker, you are standing inside property connected to sealed wartime assets. Galactic law requires immediate review by qualified authorities. Caleb raised one eyebrow. Let me guess. You are qualified. I am prepared to prevent a diplomatic incident. Caleb looked around at the disabled mercenaries, the frozen security officers, the stunned auctioneer, and me. Then he said, You sent a strike fleet to a storage unit. I think the incident already clocked in. The console pulsed once, as if it appreciated him. Awaiting approval. Caleb placed his palm on the glass. Open it. The entire bay went dark. Not power failure dark. Intentional dark. The kind of dark that makes every species remember it evolved from something hunted. Then a line of white light appeared across the far wall, thin as a knife cut, and widened into a door none of us had seen because it had been hidden behind fake plating, dust, and 9 centuries of lies. The wall slid apart without a sound. Beyond it was not a vault full of jewels. It was a room the size of a football field, dropping downward into layers of machines, cargo racks, engine cradles, and sealed black containers marked with Terran service codes. Caleb stepped forward slowly. The rest of us did not. A projection rose from the floor and built itself into a 3-dimensional inventory. 17 repair bays, 49 dormant tug craft, 812 sealed power cores, 6,000 emergency fabrication licenses, 1 deep-range navigation archive, 1 fleet activation credential. Vorik's voice cracked through the speaker. Delete that display. The garage ignored him. Caleb did not. Fleet activation, he repeated. The projection shifted. A star map opened over our heads, filling the bay with red points scattered across the sector like buried sparks. At first, I thought they were more garages. Then the labels translated. Dry dock, fuel cradle, mobile armor depot, civilian evacuation carrier, patrol tender, heavy rescue vessel. The names kept appearing until the ceiling looked like the night sky had been purchased by a mechanic from Earth. The 2 trillion credits were not the treasure. They were the petty cash left behind to keep the treasure from rusting. That was when Vorik made his final mistake. A remote intrusion spike hit the garage network, launched from one of his ships outside the moon. I saw the console flash black. The security officer shouted. The auctioneer covered his eyes. Vorik was trying to steal the authorization before Caleb understood it. For half a second, the entire room smelled like hot copper. Then Caleb reached under the console, pulled open a physical access panel, and stared at the tangled, old wiring with an expression of deep personal disappointment. Oh, that is just rude, he said. He removed one connector, swapped it with another, bridged 2 contacts with the steel wrench, and slapped the panel shut. The intrusion vanished. Outside the viewing feed, one of Vorik's ships spun harmlessly out of formation, its lights blinking like a confused Christmas tree. The garage spoke again. Hostile command rejected. Mechanic override successful. Caleb leaned over the console and smiled at the camera. You really tried to hack a repair shop while the repairman was standing inside it. No one laughed this time. Not because it was not funny. Because suddenly, all of us understood the joke was on the galaxy. The moment Vorik Thane lost control, he stopped pretending this was a legal dispute. His ships outside the moon lit their engines in perfect formation, and Port Meridian shook as docking alarms screamed through every level. A station dispatcher begged all civilians to remain calm, which proved civilians never remain calm when someone begs them through emergency speakers. On the security feed, 12 armored figures launched from Vorik's lead ship in compact boarding pods, cutting across the dark like thrown darts. Their destination was not the main port. It was the outer maintenance ring. Bay 17. The auctioneer looked at Caleb Walker with the pale expression of a man realizing he had sold a thunderstorm for the price of lunch. "We have to evacuate," he said. Caleb did not look away from the console. "How long until they reach us?" The garage answered before any officer could. "Boarding contact in 92 seconds. Hostile loadout includes plasma tools, shield frames, signal scramblers, and corporate seizure warrants." Caleb blinked. "Corporate seizure warrants?" Vorik's voice returned through the speakers, now backed by the formal tone of his private legal artificial intelligence. "By emergency salvage authority, this asset is being reclaimed pending interstellar arbitration." Caleb stared at the camera. "You brought lawyers to a break-in?" The machine paused. "Clarification requested." Caleb shook his head. "Never mind." The floor map expanded, showing the approaching team splitting through 3 access tunnels. The security officers finally remembered they were employed and raised their stun devices, but their hands shook badly enough to make the motion theoretical. I do not blame them. Vorik's people were not street thugs. They were acquisition specialists, the kind wealthy aliens sent when they wanted property to change owners before witnesses understood the paperwork. Caleb looked at the old machines around him: lift arms, welding rigs, cargo rails, pressure clamps, diagnostic cranes. To us, it looked like clutter. To him, it looked like options. He pointed at the wide bay door. "Can you lock that?" The garage replied, "Yes." Caleb pointed at the ceiling rails. "Can you move those carts?" "Yes." He pointed at the floor lights. "Can you change the gravity in here?" "Limited to safety parameters." Caleb smiled. "Safety is fine. Make it inconvenient." The garage processed that for one long second. "Confirmed. Terran defensive maintenance mode enabled." Every light in the bay turned yellow. The 3 captured mercenaries were lifted gently onto a side platform and sealed behind a transparent safety field like misbehaving museum guests. The rest of us were pulled backward by soft blue guide beams toward a marked observer zone. Caleb stayed in the open, hands empty now, standing in the middle of the garage as the first boarding team cut through the side hatch. 6 armored aliens entered in a clean wedge, shields up, weapons pointed low, confident enough to move fast. Then gravity became a personal problem. Not dangerous, not crushing, just wrong. Their boots stuck too hard on one step and floated too light on the next. A rolling engine cradle slid across their path with perfect timing, forcing them to hop sideways like dancers who hated music. One lifted a plasma tool, and a diagnostic arm stamped his equipment with a bright red rejected tag before clamping it harmlessly to the wall. Caleb winced. That is a loaner tool now. The second team breached from the upper service ramp. The garage turned the ramp into a conveyor belt moving the opposite direction. They marched with great discipline and went absolutely nowhere. I heard myself laugh again, a small terrified sound. Vorik's voice thundered through the speakers, override him. He is one human. Caleb looked up at the camera, calm as a mechanic hearing a customer complain about a bill. "That is your problem," he said. "You keep saying human like it means alone." Behind him, the treasure vault lights brightened, and 17 distant red signals answered from across the sector. The 17 red signals did not appear as threats on the station map. They appeared as acknowledgments. One by one, distant systems woke from silence and sent the same short reply through encrypted Terran channels older than most governments in the room. Standing by, Caleb Walker looked at the projection with a mechanic's frown, the kind reserved for a vehicle that somehow started after 20 years in a barn. The boarding teams saw the signals too, and their confidence finally cracked. Their armor was still expensive. Their shields were still active. Their legal warrants still glowed in official blue across their chest plates. None of that mattered to a garage that had decided they were violating workplace safety. The first team tried to regroup near the engine cradle. Caleb pointed to the floor and said, "Mark a service lane there." Yellow lines snapped into existence under their boots. The garage voice announced, "Pedestrian hazard detected. Automated traffic correction engaged." A cargo sled rolled forward at the speed of a lazy shopping cart, nudging the armored aliens backward with humiliating patience. They pushed against it. It kept nudging. They stepped aside. Another sled arrived. Within seconds, 6 trained acquisition specialists were boxed into a corner by equipment moving slower than a suburban lawn mower. The second team switched tactics and deployed signal scramblers. Small black discs scattered across the bay, meant to blind the garage network. Caleb watched them land, then glanced at the ceiling. Air compressor online. Confirmed. Blow dust through vent line 4. A gust of gray maintenance dust blasted from the overhead vents, coating every scrambler until their heat vents clogged and their lights blinked out. One alien coughed through his helmet filter and slipped backward onto a padded service mat that inflated beneath him before he hit the floor. The garage was not hurting them. That somehow made it worse. It was embarrassing them with the discipline of a retired shop teacher. Vorik screamed for them to seize the console. 3 specialists broke toward Caleb at once. He stepped behind a hanging diagnostic frame, spun an old valve wheel, and the frame dropped transparent safety shields between him and them. Their momentum carried them straight into the barrier, where they stopped with 3 soft thumps and 3 louder groans of pride. Caleb leaned around the edge. You might want to read the warning labels next time. My translator rendered his tone as helpful. It was not helpful. It was devastating. Then Vorik tried the only move left. His lead ship aimed a focused command beam at the bay, attempting to force ownership arbitration through the station core. Every display flickered. The auctioneer whispered that private fleets had used that trick to steal colonies. Caleb's expression changed. Not panic. Annoyance. He opened the console's lower drawer and found a row of physical switches labeled in plain English. Manual. Remote. Emergency. Do not touch unless you know what you are doing. He looked at the last label, then at me. That is basically an invitation. He flipped the emergency switch. Bay 17 dropped off the station network completely. Vorik's command beam struck nothing but an empty address. The garage became independent, sealed, and fully awake. Outside the moon, the 17 hidden sites answered again, stronger this time. Dormant tug craft powered up in forgotten docks. Fuel cradles unfolded. Rescue vessels opened ancient eyes. The projection above Caleb built a crown of red lights around his silhouette, and for the first time I understood why the machine kept calling him mechanic. Not soldier. Not king. Mechanic. A soldier captures what exists. A king claims what others build. But a mechanic takes dead things, listens to them, and makes them obey physics again. Caleb rested one hand on the console and spoke calmly. Bay 17, disable hostile equipment, preserve all personnel, and send Vorik Thane my bill. The garage answered with almost cheerful precision. Confirmed. Within 10 seconds, every armored intruder was seated safely in a containment field. Every weapon was locked in a labeled evidence drawer. Every warrant was stamped invalid. And Vorik's fleet outside the moon lost power to every non-essential system at once. Their lights dimmed. Their engines cooled. Their proud black ships drifted like expensive paperweights. Caleb looked at the final display, then gave a small nod. Good shop. By the time the Galactic Claims Authority arrived, Port Meridian had become the quietest trade station in the quadrant. No one joked in the food courts. No one complained about delayed departures. Even the luxury merchants stopped shouting about discounts, which was how I knew the universe had been properly shaken. 6 Authority cruisers docked under white beacon light, and a delegation entered Bay 17 wearing the heavy robes of beings who believed paperwork could intimidate reality. They found Caleb Walker sitting on an overturned parts crate, drinking coffee from a dented metal cup the garage had somehow fabricated from an old Earth pattern. Around him, Vorik Thane's acquisition team sat unharmed inside transparent containment fields, each one holding a printed safety violation notice. Their weapons had been cataloged, their warrants had been rejected, and their pride had been left somewhere on the floor between the service lanes and the tool lockers. Vorik himself arrived last, escorted by station officers, his polished armor still perfect, but his expression badly dented. He tried to speak first. Honored arbiters, this human has activated restricted wartime property without proper interstellar supervision. Caleb raised one finger without looking up from his coffee. Purchased property. The lead arbiter, a tall creature with silver eyes and a voice like a closing bank vault, approached the console. The machine projected the sale record, the ownership transfer, the Terran salvage covenant, the Walker bloodline confirmation, and 17 awakened asset sites across the sector. The Arbiter studied it all for a long time. Vorik began to recover his confidence. Surely, he said, antique human claims cannot supersede modern commercial law. The console answered before the Arbiter could. Incorrect. Contract renewed automatically through unpaid storage occupation by successor station governments. Back fees calculated. A new number appeared in the air. I watched 3 officials recoil. The station had owed Bay 17 rent for 900 years. Caleb nearly choked on his coffee. Wait, they owe me money too? The garage replied, affirmative. Caleb looked at the station director. The station director looked like he wanted to become mist. The Arbiter lifted one hand for silence. Under galactic commercial law, inheritance law, salvage law, emergency covenant law, and hostile interference provisions, the ownership claim is valid. Vorik made a sound that did not translate well. The Arbiter continued. Caleb Walker of Earth is the lawful owner of Bay 17, its attached financial reserve, its sealed equipment, and all registered auxiliary sites. Vorik stepped forward. This is madness. He is one mechanic. That was when the whole Bay changed. Not physically, emotionally. Every alien in that room heard the word mechanic and understood it differently than we had hours earlier. We had thought it meant low status. Grease under the nails. Someone who fixed what important people used. But the old Terran garage had treated that word like a rank, a bloodline, almost a crown. Caleb stood, set down his cup, and looked at Vorik with the calm patience of someone who had heard enough noise from a failing engine. My family fixes things, he said. Cars, trucks, generators, bad wiring, broken deals. Then he nodded toward the ships drifting helplessly beyond the moon. Looks like your fleet needs work. No one laughed loudly, but the silence smiled. The Arbiter ordered Vorik's vessels impounded until fines, damages, false seizure penalties, and unpaid interference costs were resolved. Bay 17 generated the invoice. It was longer than some religious texts. Caleb read the final line, whistled softly, and said, I should call my mother. She always said garage work would never make me rich. Across the sector, the 17 red signals stabilized into Terran white. Forgotten docks opened. Rescue ships reported ready. Old machines woke and waited for human hands. That day changed the way the galaxy priced junk, but more than that, it changed the way we looked at humans. We had believed they were young. We had believed they were simple. We had believed they only inherited small worlds, old stories, and stubborn habits. We were wrong. Humans inherited keys. They inherited machines that remembered them. They inherited doors we had buried because we were afraid of what waited behind them. Caleb Walker paid 40 credits for a dead garage. By sunset, every empire in known space had learned a new rule. If a human buys trash, check whether the trash salutes him.